What if I told you that the quietest killer in your life isn't failure, fear, or even time? It's the word later. Later always sounds harmless. It wears the disguise of logic, making us feel like we're in control, that there will be a better time, a more favorable condition, or the right emotion to finally begin. But the truth is, later is the most dangerous lie we tell ourselves, because it delays action, steals opportunity, and quietly kills what matters most. We promise to call back later, to start later, to express love, to apologize, to forgive, someday when time and mood feel right, but few realize that later is where dreams are buried, where love fades into silence, and where the most precious thing we have, time, is lost without a trace. There is no moment more perfect than now, no future day more certain than this one, and no force more powerful than the decision to begin, right here, right now. Every minute you hesitate is a minute you abandon your potential. Every day you postpone what matters is a day you surrender to regret instead of progress. If you're tired of overthinking, if you've wasted too many mornings telling yourself not yet, then stay with me. Because what follows will show you not only why you must move now, but how. If this message speaks to you, subscribe, stay present, and share your story in the comments. Someone needs to hear it. The moment is here, don't leave it behind. One later is the most dangerous lie we tell ourselves. Later is seductive. It sounds reasonable, even responsible. It tells you to wait for clarity, for the perfect time, for life to settle down. But that voice, calm, quiet, and dressed in logic, is the most dangerous form of self-deception. Because while you're waiting for that imaginary right moment, life continues without pause. And in that space between intention and action, everything important begins to slip away. I remember a friend of mine, brilliant, full of energy, always planning. For years he talked about starting a woodworking business. He would sketch out ideas on napkins, obsess over tools, and watch tutorials late into the night. But every time someone asked, "When are you starting?" he'd smile and say, "Soon, when I'm ready." Ready, in his mind, meant more money, more time, a better location. He kept putting it off, month after month, year after year. Then life threw him off balance. His mother got sick, his marriage fell apart, and he had to take a job far from home. Today he still has those sketches and talks about that dream. But the fire is gone. It wasn't failure that killed it. It was delayed. That's what later does. It doesn't make a scene. It doesn't show up with red flags. It simply waits. And while it waits, it drains your urgency, your belief, your momentum. That's the quiet cruelty of procrastination. It doesn't feel like harm in the moment, but it slowly robs you of the only thing you can never get back: time. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius wrote not in grand speeches, but in urgent reminders to himself. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. There's nothing morbid about that. It's clarity. The kind of clarity we need to remember that action is not something we wait for. It's something we choose. When we lie to ourselves with later, what we're really doing is avoiding the discomfort of now. It's not that we don't know what matters, it's that we don't want to face what it takes. Because action requires risk, it exposes us. It forces us to give up control over the outcome. But that discomfort is exactly where the Stoic mindset finds strength. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And that's the root of delay. We imagine all the things that could go wrong, all the judgments we might face, all the pain we might feel. So we choose comfort over courage, stillness over effort. But what we call comfort is often just avoidance in disguise. Think about what you've been postponing. Not the small stuff, but the conversations, the changes, the decisions that have been nudging at you for months or even years. That inner voice you've learned to mute with distractions, with busyness, with logic. You tell yourself you're being patient, you call it timing. But deep down, you know it's fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of starting, fear of imperfection, fear of disruption. The Stoic approach doesn't ask you to silence that fear. It asks you to move anyway. Fear is part of life, but regret is not something you have to accept. You don't need to feel ready. You need to feel honest. Look at your life and ask, not what do I want someday, but what demands action today? What are you letting slip through your fingers under the illusion that there's still time? Later is not a schedule. It's a sedative. It keeps you asleep while your days disappear. Every not today compounds. Every delay becomes harder to break. And one day, you wake up to a version of your life you didn't choose. You simply drifted into it. The Stoics believed that discipline starts with clarity. Not clarity about the future, but about this moment and what it requires. The present is where your power lives. Not tomorrow, not next month, not someday when things calm down. Now. And if you can be courageous now just once, you'll find that the next step becomes easier. Momentum builds not from grand plans, but from simple, honest movement in the direction of what matters. So when you hear yourself say, "I'll do it later," pause. Don't ignore that whisper. Look at it. Question it. Ask yourself, what am I really avoiding? What am I trading away when I delay this? You'll often find the answer isn't logical, it's emotional. But that's exactly why it must be faced. Because anything worth doing will rarely feel easy at first, and anything you value deeply will ask for effort before it offers reward. Later has already cost too much. It's time to reclaim what it's taken. Not by rushing, not by overwhelming yourself with unrealistic change, but by simply refusing to drift any further. By choosing one thing today that matters. Then doing it, not perfectly, but fully present. That's how you dismantle the lie. That's how you make peace with time. And that's how you step finally into the life you were meant to live. 2. Your future is built by what you choose to do today. The future is not something that appears overnight. It doesn't arrive in a burst of luck or a moment of breakthrough. It is shaped quietly, patiently, and sometimes painfully by what you choose to do today. Not what you intend, not what you hope for, but what you actually act on. And this truth is both liberating and terrifying, because it means you hold more power than you think, but also more responsibility than you've probably accepted. There was a time when I didn't understand this. I used to believe change would come when circumstances aligned, when I had more time, when my finances stabilized, when I finally felt inspired enough. So I waited, I read books, made plans, and filled notebooks with ideas. But I didn't act. Each day felt full, but nothing truly moved. Until one morning, standing in front of the mirror, I saw the fatigue of mental clutter, the weight of all the things I had planned but never started. And in that moment, it hit me. The gap between the life I imagined and the life I was living wasn't made of fate. It was made of, or more accurately, my lack of choices. That day, I made a change so small it felt insignificant. I set my alarm 30 minutes earlier. No excuses, no negotiation. Just 30 quiet minutes for focused work before the world intruded. I did that for a week, then 2, then 6 months, and something shifted. Not just in results, but in how I saw myself. I was no longer the person who waited. I was the person who moved, slowly, consistently, and deliberately. And the longer I kept that promise to myself, the more momentum I built. From those 30 minutes came clarity, confidence, and eventually opportunities I could never have scripted. That's what most people miss. They think the future is about big leaps, life-altering moments. But the Stoics remind us, greatness is in discipline, not drama. Seneca wrote that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. But preparation is built in the mundane, in the discipline of ordinary days. What you choose today, how you speak, how you respond, how you spend your first hour after waking, is a declaration to the future. It tells the world what you're serious about. It tells your mind what to believe about you. And that belief, when repeated in action, rewires everything. This is not motivational fluff, it's structure. Your habits are the architecture of your destiny. Every time you skip the workout, scroll past the book, silence the thought that says, you should do this now, you're laying bricks. The problem is you're just building in the wrong direction. And what you build becomes where you live. If you don't like where you are, it's not because life failed you. It's because you haven't been showing up to shape it. That's what the Stoic mindset offers us. Radical ownership, not of outcomes, but of process. Epictetus didn't tell us to control the future. He told us to control our choices. That means you don't need to know what next year holds. You just need to show up today with intention. Speak with more kindness. Finish the task you keep avoiding. Begin the habit you've postponed. Because while others wait for motivation, you train self-command. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Growth always begins with friction, but so does regret. The difference is, one strengthens you and the other haunts you. The moment you act, even in small ways, you prove to yourself that you are not your past delays. You are not your fears. You are the person who moves anyway. And that identity is the foundation of everything. Because your future self isn't someone you meet someday, it's someone you build now. In silence, in discipline, in the invisible choices no one claps for. The beauty of this truth is that you don't need perfection. You need honesty. You need the willingness to show up tired, to work when it's boring, to repeat what feels unimpressive. Because repetition, when done with purpose, becomes rhythm, and rhythm becomes reality. So ask yourself, not what you want 5 years from now, but what you're committed to today. Not what you believe in theory, but what you embody in action. Your schedule reveals your future far more than your goals do. And your daily decisions are louder than any dream you keep in your head. You don't need to change your life all at once. You just need to stop abandoning today. Every time you choose to be present, to stay consistent, to take even one meaningful step, you reclaim authorship over your life. Not by force, but by alignment. You become less reactive, more grounded, and more focused. You stop waiting for the future to find you, and you start building the kind of future that deserves you. What you do today is not just an event, it's a vote, a signal, a seed. Plant it wisely, water it with intention, and trust that even the smallest act, done with awareness, can reshape everything. In the end, it's not time that changes you. It's what you choose to do with it. 3. Regret is what happens when we postpone what matters. Regret rarely announces itself in the moment. It arrives silently, long after the moment has passed, when the words are no longer possible, when the door is no longer open, when time has erased the choice you once had. We often imagine regret as the result of some great mistake, some bold action that backfired. But more often, it comes not from doing, but from not doing, from holding back, from waiting, from telling ourselves, not yet, over and over, until not yet becomes never. The things we postpone are rarely trivial. We don't delay brushing our teeth or drinking water. We delay the things that matter, the vulnerable things, saying I love you, saying I'm sorry, saying goodbye, starting again, letting go, speaking the truth. These are the moments that define who we are, and yet these are the moments we most often avoid. Not because we don't care, but because we care too much. Because they expose us, because they ask us to feel, because they demand a level of courage we're not used to practicing. So instead, we bargain with time, assuming tomorrow will offer a softer landing. But time is never guaranteed. And when the moment slips, what we're left with is a weight that can't be lifted by logic. That's what regret is, a weight that logic can't fix. The Stoics warned us about this. They didn't tell us to suppress emotion. They told us to live intentionally, to avoid the kind of suffering that stems from indecision and avoidance. Seneca said that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and nowhere is that truer than in the hesitation before meaningful action. We imagine the worst outcomes. We dramatize rejection. We fear the unknown. And in that hesitation, we trade authenticity for safety. But safety is an illusion when time is moving. There is no pause button. Each moment unclaimed becomes a moment lost. Regret is not just emotional, it's existential. It strikes at the question we try not to ask. What would my life have looked like if I had chosen differently? Not necessarily more success, not more comfort, but more presence, more truth, more peace. Regret isn't loud, it doesn't scream. It settles in like silence, like something unfinished, like a thought you can't let go of, even when everything around you seems fine. And often, it haunts us not because of what happened, but because of what could have happened if we'd acted when it mattered. That's why this idea sits at the heart of Stoic philosophy. Act now, not later. Not recklessly, not out of panic, but with clarity, with presence, with integrity. The Stoics were not obsessed with productivity. They were obsessed with meaning, and meaning lives in the things we're most afraid to face, in the hard conversations, in the steps we avoid, in the decisions we keep pushing to next week. But when we postpone what matters, we trade a short moment of discomfort for a long season of restlessness. We gain nothing. We lose everything that could have grown from action. Think about what's been lingering at the edge of your mind. Something you know you need to say, something you need to start, something you need to stop pretending doesn't matter. That thing you keep pushing to the side because the timing doesn't feel perfect. You don't need more time, you need more truth. You need the willingness to face what scares you, not because you won't feel fear, but because you refuse to let fear make decisions for you. That's stoicism, not cold detachment, but disciplined presence. Choosing to step forward, not when it's easy, but when it's necessary. There will always be reasons to wait. That's what makes regret so common. It feeds on hesitation. It multiplies through avoidance. But there's something remarkable that happens when you do the thing you've been delaying. The silence lifts, the tension dissolves, and in its place, there's a quiet kind of power. The kind that comes not from control, but from alignment. Because nothing is heavier than regret, and nothing is lighter than peace. This is your reminder. Stop waiting to be ready. Stop believing that time will wait for you to find courage. The truth is, courage doesn't come before the decision. It comes after. It grows through action, not contemplation. And the longer you postpone what matters, the more you risk never becoming the person who can hold what you desire. Life doesn't punish you for failure, it punishes you for inaction. That is the real danger. Not doing something and failing, but doing nothing and wondering for the rest of your life what would have changed if you had just acted. So if something matters, act on it, not tomorrow, not later, now. Because regret is not a warning, it's a consequence, and your future peace depends on your willingness to face what matters today. 4. If it's important, don't wait. What matters most rarely screams for your attention. It doesn't appear on your calendar. It doesn't come with a deadline. It waits, quietly, patiently, until you're ready to notice. But life doesn't slow down for you to make space. And if you don't prioritize what truly matters, you'll find yourself always doing what feels urgent, but never what's essential. That's the trap. And I fell right into it. It was a Saturday morning, the kind I usually reserved for catching up. Emails, errands, and unfinished tasks. My son walked into the room with his baseball glove. He didn't say a word, just held it up and smiled. I paused, looked at the screen in front of me, and told him we'd go out later, maybe in the afternoon. He nodded and walked away, and I told myself it was fine. I was being responsible. I had things to do. But an hour later, something unsettled me. I couldn't remember the last time we'd gone outside together on a weekend. Not just passed each other in the hallway, but actually been present. So I stood up, walked to his room, and said, "Let's go now." He lit up like I had given him the world. And when we stepped outside, gloves in hand, I realized how close I'd come to trading what was sacred for what was scheduled. That moment stayed with me because it reminded me of something the Stoics never stopped repeating. You don't own time. You only borrow it. And when you postpone what's important, you're assuming life will wait for you to catch up. But it won't. It never has. Life moves. Children grow. People drift. Chances disappear. And most of the time, you don't even notice it happening until it's already gone. In modern life, we're trained to chase efficiency, to measure our worth by output, to believe that the more we do, the more we are. But that belief system robs us of depth. It makes us value noise over stillness, speed over meaning, and multitasking over presence. So even when we recognize what's truly important, our relationships, our health, our purpose, we still tell ourselves, not now. We put it off like it's just another item on the list. But the things that matter most don't belong on a list. They belong at the center. And if you don't choose to center them, life will push them to the side. Stoic philosophy teaches us to live with intention, not intensity. Intensity is emotional, reactive, and short-lived. Intention is quiet, consistent, and anchored in clarity. When something is important, when it speaks to your soul, challenges your values, or tugs at your conscience, you don't need more information. You don't need more time. You need the courage to act before the moment hardens into memory. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." He wasn't glorifying urgency, he was pointing to the presence. The challenge is that we often confuse importance with comfort. We think we'll do it later because we'll be more prepared, less busy, and more emotionally ready. But preparation doesn't create presence. Action does. And the longer you wait to do the important thing, whether it's showing up for someone, changing direction, or simply being fully where you are, heavier it becomes. Delay doesn't shrink the weight of significance. It multiplies the burden of regret. So the next time something inside you whispers, "This matters," listen. Don't drown it in distraction. Don't bury it beneath excuses that sound responsible but feel empty. Life won't announce the last time you'll get to do something. You won't know it was your final chance to say the words, hold the hand, take the walk, until it's already behind you. That's the brutal elegance of time. It gives you choices, but never guarantees second chances. And yet there's power in that truth, because it means right now still belongs to you. You can shift direction. You can walk into the other room and be present. You can cancel the unnecessary and choose the essential. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need clarity. You need the willingness to act as if today matters, because it does. Every moment you claim is one less moment you'll mourn. Every time you choose what's meaningful over what's comfortable, you build a life you'll be proud to remember. So if it's important, stop waiting. Don't overthink it. Don't seek approval. Don't wait for the stars to align. Important things live in the imperfect, in the interrupted, in the spontaneous. They don't ask you to be ready. They ask you to be real. And the truth is, there will always be more emails, more errands, more things pulling at your attention, but there won't always be more time for what truly matters. And if you let it slip now, you may never get it back. You know what matters. You always have. The only question is, will you act before the moment passes, or will you watch it disappear and wonder why it never came again? 5. You don't need the perfect moment. Just the decision to begin waiting is comfortable. It gives the illusion of control. We tell ourselves that we're being thoughtful, patient, and strategic. But deep down, we know the truth. We're stalling. Not because the time isn't right, but because we're afraid. Afraid to look foolish. Afraid to be vulnerable. Afraid to start without guarantees. That's why so many people wait for the perfect moment, the clean slate, the ideal mood, the full plan. But what they don't realize is that the perfect moment is a myth. It's a moving target. And the more you chase it, the further you drift from the life you were meant to build. Real change never begins with ideal conditions. It begins with a decision, quiet, simple, internal. A moment where you finally say, enough waiting, enough thinking, enough pretending that someday will feel different from today. You move not because you feel brave, but because you're tired of staying still. And that shift, that inner turn from delay to movement, is where transformation begins. Not in the external world, but within the mind that stops making excuses. I once met a man who wanted to run a marathon. He wasn't young, he wasn't in shape, he didn't have the right shoes or the right diet, but he made a decision. He didn't start with a coach or a gym membership. He started with 10 minutes of walking after dinner. Every day, no matter what. And after 6 months, he was running. Not fast, not far, but running. 2 years later, he crossed the finish line. Not because he waited for the best moment to train, but because he stopped waiting at all. That's the kind of clarity Stoicism teaches us to cultivate. Not the fantasy of perfection, but the discipline of presence. The willingness to start where you are, with what you have, knowing that time doesn't owe you ideal conditions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is endurable, then endure it. If it is not, then stop complaining." In other words, if the moment isn't perfect, so what? It's not supposed to be. You don't need to be perfect, you need purpose. And purpose requires motion. The modern mind is addicted to preparation. We collect information, compare plans, and watch others do what we haven't dared to begin. But preparation becomes a trap when it substitutes for progress. You can spend your whole life getting ready and never take a single real step. Because readiness isn't a feeling, it's a result. It comes after action, not before. The decision to begin is what sets everything else in motion, and every meaningful journey begins the same way. Uncertain, imperfect, real. There's something sacred about first steps, not because they're impressive, but because they're honest. They say, I'm no longer waiting for life to change, I'm stepping into it as I am. That kind of courage doesn't require confidence, it requires conviction. The Stoics remind us that how we act matters more than when. If you act with virtue, with intention, discipline, and clarity, you honor the present moment. And that's all you're ever guaranteed. When you believe you need the perfect setup to begin, you give power to your fear. You wait for the stars to align instead of learning to walk in the dark. But growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in friction, in resistance, in the quiet decision to choose forward, even when nothing feels certain. The moment you begin, everything shifts, not because the world changes, but because you do. You become someone who moves, someone who shows up, someone who lives on purpose. So the question isn't whether now is perfect, it's whether now is honest. Whether you can look at your life and admit that waiting hasn't brought you closer to who you want to become. Whether you can accept that time is not a renewable resource and every delay is a small theft from your own future. Once you see that clearly, beginning stops being something to fear. It becomes something sacred, a reclamation of your time, your energy, your voice. Stop telling yourself that more planning will save you. Stop pretending that confidence will magically appear. Confidence is built by keeping promises to yourself, and that begins the moment you take the first imperfect step. So start where you are, not because everything is ready, but because you are. Ready to stop rehearsing, ready to stop watching, ready to live. If something inside you has been waiting, don't ask if the timing is right. Ask if you're willing to stop hiding behind it. Because the people who change their lives are not the ones who wait for the green light. They're the ones who moved forward in the dark, guided not by clarity, but by decision. And the longer you hesitate, the more your dreams fade into memory. You don't need the perfect moment. You just need to begin. And when you do, you'll realize the only thing that ever separated you from the life you imagined was the belief that you had to wait. 6. Presence is power. You can't control every outcome. You can't predict every storm, but you can control how present you are in this moment. And when you are truly present, fully engaged, fully awake, something shifts. You stop reacting to life as if it's happening to someone else, and you begin responding to it with clarity, strength, and quiet authority. That's where real power lives, not in being perfect, but in being here. Presence isn't about slowing down. It's about showing up. It's about choosing not to live distracted, not to divide yourself between screens and thoughts and unfinished conversations. The world rewards speed and noise, but Stoicism teaches something different. It teaches attention, the ability to be undisturbed by chaos, the power to see clearly, to choose wisely, to act with restraint. And that level of presence, when practiced consistently, becomes unshakable. Modern life tempts us to be everywhere except where we are. We chase deadlines, scroll endlessly, and think 3 steps ahead. But what we often miss is that the most effective people, the ones who truly move the needle, aren't frantic. They're focused. They don't run from moment to moment. They occupy them. Because when you're present, you listen differently. You speak with intention. You act with alignment. And that's what makes your decisions meaningful. Not that they're dramatic, but that they're deliberate. The Stoics trained for this. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they understood the battlefield isn't out there. It's inside. And the battle is against fragmentation. To be present is to gather your scattered self, to return to center, and to root your attention where your life is actually unfolding. Now, it's not a soft practice. It's not passive. It takes discipline to stay grounded when your mind wants to run, when emotions demand attention, when the world pulls at you from 1,000 directions. But the one who stays is the one who decides. And the one who decides is the one who leads. Presence clarifies. It sharpens your judgment. It strips away noise and shows you what actually matters. Most mistakes aren't made from lack of knowledge, but from lack of awareness. You knew better, but you weren't paying attention. You missed the signal. You spoke too fast. You acted too late, not because you were incapable, but because you weren't there. And over time, those small lapses compound into regret. But when you slow your breathing, quiet your thoughts, and fully enter the moment, you see more. You see through fear. You see past urgency, and you find stillness not in escape, but in command. That's what makes presence so powerful. It brings you back to your own authority. In person, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to predict what happens next. You don't need to posture, persuade, or perform. You simply respond. With calm, with integrity, with self-possession. And that kind of response can't be faked. It can't be borrowed. It has to be cultivated, moment by moment, decision by decision, through the practice of returning, again and again. The mind will wander, the emotions will rise, the distractions will come. But each time you choose to come back, you strengthen a muscle that most people let waste away. And that muscle, attention, is the foundation of every other virtue. Without it, there is no self-control. Without it, there is no wisdom. Without it, there is no peace. Because peace isn't found in still environments, it's found in still minds. Minds that can stand still in the fire. Minds that can remain steady in motion. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't chase a solution. Don't reach for escape. Reach for presence. Ask yourself, what is real right now? What can I control right now? What deserves my full attention right now? These are Stoic questions, not theoretical but practical. They bring you back to the only place where change begins, the present. You don't need to master everything at once. You don't need a perfect routine or a quiet life. You need the willingness to notice when you've drifted and to return. That's presence. It's not about staying centered all the time. It's about catching yourself quicker, losing less time to noise, and choosing not to leave yourself behind in moments that matter. And when you live that way long enough, something deeper takes root. Your words carry more weight. Your actions have more direction. Your mind becomes less reactive. Your heart becomes steadier. Presence won't solve every problem, but it will show you what problems are worth solving. It won't eliminate discomfort, but it will give you the strength to endure it without falling apart. And it won't make you untouchable, but it will make you unshaken. There is nothing more powerful than a person fully here. Not chasing, not clinging, not hiding, just awake, just aware, just aligned. Presence doesn't make you soft, it makes you sharp, it makes you still. And in a world addicted to reaction, stillness is a form of rebellion. It's where your strength begins, and it's where you finally start to live. 7. Small actions today beat big plans for someday. Big plans are seductive. They give you a sense of control, a future to look forward to, and the illusion that you're already halfway there. You sketch ideas, set lofty goals, and feel a rush of motivation every time you imagine the end result. But all of that remains theory until it meets the resistance of real life. And real life rarely waits for your plans to be perfect. That's why what matters most isn't how grand your vision is. It's whether or not you're moving, right now, in the smallest way possible. Most people don't fail because their dreams are too small. They fail because they never begin. They wait for the perfect time, the ideal setup, the moment when everything aligns. But that moment doesn't come. What does come are days filled with distractions, doubts, and delays. So they hold on to the dream while quietly walking away from it, one day at a time. Until one day, the dream no longer excites them. It haunts them. Not because it was impossible, but because it was never acted on. The truth is, action, any action, is worth more than 1,000 ideas. A 5-minute walk beats an unread fitness plan. Writing one paragraph matters more than outlining a whole book you never start. Recording a single video with your phone and imperfect lighting moves you further than weeks spent researching cameras. That's what makes the Stoic approach so grounded. It doesn't ask for the ideal, it asks for the real. It reminds you that philosophy isn't something you believe, it's something you practice. And practice begins with action, however small. There's a kind of quiet courage in starting small. It doesn't get attention. It doesn't make headlines, but it builds momentum, and momentum compounds. The person who commits to 10 push-ups a day eventually reshapes their body and mind. The one who studies for 15 minutes each night ends up fluent, while others wait for time to open up. The man who decides to listen with full attention to his partner, just once a day, rebuilds trust that years of talking couldn't fix. These are not dramatic gestures, they are consistent ones. And consistency beats intensity every time. Modern life pushes us toward scale, toward visibility, toward results that look good on paper. But Stoicism asks us to scale inward, to choose mastery over noise, to focus not on how much you do, but how you do it. It's not about impressing others, it's about aligning with your principles. And when you take even one small action that honors your intention, you reclaim agency. You stop being the person who dreams and start becoming the person who moves. The Stoics didn't write about chasing goals. They wrote about the right use of time. They understood that discipline isn't about rigidity. It's about rhythm. And rhythm comes from repetition. not inspiration. If you wait to feel ready, you'll wait forever. But if you do something, anything today, you change the trajectory of your tomorrow. 1 degree of shift, done consistently, will land you in a completely different destination over time. That's not a theory, that's math, and it applies to every part of your life. Start with what you have, right here, right now. Don't underestimate the impact of a single, small step taken with full attention. That's what builds character. That's what builds belief. And belief, reinforced by daily action, becomes identity. You don't become disciplined by making big declarations. You become disciplined by doing small things on the days you feel like doing nothing. When things feel overwhelming, simplify. Cut the weight of grand expectations. Ask yourself, what's the next small action I can take that I won't regret tomorrow? Maybe it's a phone call you've avoided. Maybe it's drinking water before reaching for caffeine. Maybe it's sitting still for 5 minutes and breathing deeply. Whatever it is, do it fully. Do it with your attention, and trust that it's enough to start, because movement matters more than magnitude. Intention matters more than intensity. When you show up for your life in small ways, you change it in big ways. And the Stoic path isn't about chasing success. It's about becoming someone who lives deliberately, someone who acts today instead of just planning for someday. So if you've been stuck in the loop of planning, preparing, and perfecting, this is your break in the pattern. Don't wait for the feeling. Don't wait for the schedule to clear. Don't wait until you figure it all out. You don't need to be certain. You just need to begin. And you don't need to begin big. Just begin. Because years from now, you won't remember how grand your plans were. You'll remember whether or not you moved, whether or not you choose to honor the moment in front of you with presence, with action, with quiet resolve. That's what builds a life. Not theory, not intentional, but small, honest acts of discipline done today. 8. You'll never live this exact moment again. No moment repeats itself. Not this breath, not this second. Not this exact version of you sitting right here, thinking what you're thinking, feeling what you're feeling. Life doesn't send reminders for moments that pass. It simply moves on, quietly and irreversibly. And while it's tempting to believe that the next day, the next week, the next opportunity will feel more perfect or more clear, the reality is that every moment you postpone is a moment you cannot reclaim. We live as though time is on our side. We speak about tomorrow like it's promised, like it belongs to us. But tomorrow is a concept. This moment is reality. And yet, this moment is the one we waste the most. We waste it by looking backward at what we can't change, or forward at what we can't control. We fill it with thoughts that don't serve us, distractions that don't grow us, and excuses that slowly detach us from what matters. The result is a life that feels full, but never grounded, busy, but rarely meaningful. Presence isn't about moving slowly, it's about moving with depth. When you're fully here, your choices sharpen, your emotions settle, and your attention becomes a tool instead of a burden. But presence requires discipline. It demands that you stop letting your mind race ahead into imagined futures or wander back into unresolved pasts. Stoicism brings you back, not with rituals or philosophy for philosophy's sake, but with reminders that time is your most sacred resource. And what you give your attention to in this very moment becomes your actual life. Not your plans, not your intentions, your attention. This is why small moments matter, because they're not just filler, they are life. That one breath where you pause instead of reacting, that short silence before you speak, that subtle shift from scrolling to reflecting. These things may seem minor, but they're not. They're decisions. And decisions form direction. Over time, those small choices either build the kind of life you're proud to own, or one you don't recognize anymore. We often think the significant parts of life are the big events, the milestones, the turning points. But when we look back, what defines us isn't one massive leap. It's the 1,000 invisible steps we took or didn't take. It's the moments we showed up or disappeared. The times we listened instead of spoke, acted instead of doubted, breathed instead of panicked. Every day gives you those opportunities, but not twice. Once. You either inhabit the moment or you miss it. There's no pause button and no rewind. The modern mind is trained to move fast, to multitask, to skim the surface of everything. But presence asks you to go against that current, to move more slowly, to feel deeper, to engage more fully with fewer things. This isn't weakness, it's focus, it's clarity. It's the strength of a different kind, the kind that doesn't shout but endures, the kind that doesn't just pass time but uses it wisely. When the Stoics speak of memento mori, they're not trying to scare you, they're waking you up. They're reminding you that awareness of death is what gives life its urgency. Not to rush, but to revere. Not to chase more, but to cherish now. Because when you remember that each moment is unrepeatable, your standards change. You become less tolerant of distraction, less interested in drama, and more committed to truth. You stop letting time use you, and you start using time to create what matters. This isn't about being perfect, it's about being aware. The most dangerous thing isn't failure, it's absence. Being physically present but mentally gone. Being emotionally numb because you've trained yourself to avoid what's real. You don't need to feel ready, you need to be awake. Awake to what you're choosing right now. Awaken to the fact that your reactions shape your reality. Awake to the fact that this moment, ordinary, imperfect, and unremarkable as it may seem, will never return, and that makes it sacred. So if you're waiting for some sign to slow down, to come back to yourself, to remember why you started, this is it. Not because the world demands it, but because your peace depends on it. Peace doesn't come from external control, it comes from internal presence. From the ability to meet this moment with full attention and say, I am here. I'm not drifting, I'm choosing. That single act of awareness is more powerful than any routine, more life-changing than any resolution. You'll never live this exact moment again. The person you are now, the choices you're facing, the air you're breathing, it's all passing. Not to threaten you, but to invite you, to live with depth, to choose with clarity, to stop waiting and start witnessing. You don't need more time, you need more presence. And once you understand that, you begin to live. Not in ideas, not in fears, not in projections, but in truth. And the truth is always found now. Every moment you hesitate, something irreplaceable slips away. This is not just a call to action, it's a call to awareness. Through the lens of Stoic philosophy, we've explored how delaying what matters, waiting for the perfect time, or drifting through the day numbs your potential and clouds your inner strength. But it doesn't have to be this way. You don't need the perfect conditions to start. You only need the presence of mind to choose now. Each decision you make, however small, either moves you toward the life you want or keeps you chained to the one you're merely surviving. Whether it's one breath, one page, or one clear word spoken from the heart, the smallest present action holds more power than the most detailed future plan. That is the Stoic discipline. Daily clarity, daily commitment, daily action. You won't always feel ready, but readiness isn't the requirement. Intention is, and when practiced daily, intention becomes character. So ask yourself often, what can I do right now that my future self will thank me for? Let that guide you. Let it simplify your choices. Let it recenter you every time you drift. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share your story below. What small action have you been postponing? Your words may give someone else the courage to act. And that too is a step forward, together.